If I think of countries like South Africa, no one country is like the other because they, as I said at the beginning, they all have unique political economies. But we are similar because this is the paradox. Because of the settler power and because of oppression, you develop structurally this inequality. There was no access into the system. So Black South Africans were oppressed. They were literally prevented from being capitalists. I mean, yes, some of them got degrees as teachers or nurses, but you couldn't be a capitalist. It was not possible. So these contradictions are very powerful. If I take the judiciary, as I said, we have a strong legal system, a Roman Dutch law, and it's well entrenched. We've had brilliant jurists in the white community. And then we created an apex court called the Constitutional Court to resolve conflicts and make the important decisions. And this court has functioned magnificently. So the ex-president who's been accused of corruption is being charged. He's defied the Constitutional Court. And like Lula, he may well go to jail. And in this country, he will go to jail if the court decides he should go to jail. So the rule of law, conceptually and in theory, is strong. Nevertheless, we have high levels of corruption. Now, it doesn't apply that much from what we can see in the judiciary. Maybe low-level magistrates and police officials are given money to lose files, and there's a bit of that, quite a bit of that, because we have quite a strong criminal element. We have strong gangs here, and they're in the illegal economy, and there's an underground economy, and COVID enhanced that in areas like smuggling in illegal cigarettes. But this is South Africa. South Africa is the contradiction. And the long-term strategic question is whether organically in the next 100 years we can manage our way through these contradictions and gradually resolve them after this incredibly fast start. We literally turned the country upside down. When I was lecturing in America once to young undergrads, they wanted me to do a talk on South Africa. And then reluctantly, eventually I did. And they said, well, how much change? I said, well, if you take the United States and you decide to drive on the other side of the road, because they drive on the wrong side, as far as we're concerned, and you absorbed Canada and Mexico, and you banned all guns, and you only allowed women to vote, that's essentially what we did in the space of 5 years. So it was a total change. It was not that violent a change. Amazingly, we negotiated this change, and not everybody got what they wanted, but all the contradictions are embedded in this. There's been a significant new Black middle class and Black elites. So as I said, some of the wealthiest people in this country now are Black South Africans who have managed to take advantage of the change. We have a policy called Black Economic Empowerment, which is a legislated set of conditions. And all companies are scored by a complex formula on their level of transformation. The banks of the boards of our biggest banks now are dominated by Black South Africans. So it's very contradictory. And, I can't explain it more than describe it. I understand where it's come from. The great question is, where's it going? White South Africans are immigrating because we have low growth rates, and they are legislatively precluded from entering many, many jobs. So young children are leaving in large numbers, middle class young children, in order to go back to where they, as radical Black people say, go back to where you came from. So they go to Britain and they go to Australia and they go to America. Our professionals are leaving. We've had quite a big exit of doctors and accountants. And of course, all people in emerging countries are migratory. Many, would leave Brazil and go to somewhere else, or leave Argentina and go to Spain. That's continuing. So it's full of these contradictions. It's pregnant with contradictions. And that's what makes it so interesting. And that's why I think it's in a way a microcosm of the global macrocosm, because we've got some of the best and some of the worst. and they all have to live next to each other. The one thing I will say about the contradictions, African culture is an extraordinarily wonderful thing. It's very humanistic by nature and has been remarkably forgiving. And of course, what whites represent is upward mobility into the domain of modernity. So I might want to unpack that later. But if I go to Dubai, I grew up in Yemen. If I go to Dubai and I go to a mall and I see absolute physical modernity, but I'm dealing with a history that is traditional. And the men in their dish dashers are exercising their rights and working and behaving in all sorts of complex sociological ways that reflect the complexity, the clash between modernity and tradition. And I will find that in Malaysia. I'll find that in almost everywhere I go. I just want to build on Enes's point. South Africa is the most sophisticated economy on the continent by far. We have other countries maybe growing faster, but if you take Kenya, for example, our economy is 40 times bigger than the Kenyan economy. Nigeria is 180 million, so it's overtaken us in total gross GDP, but not in GDP per capita, because there's this colonial heritage. And one last thing, I always look at a country and I say, what's the infrastructure? Physical infrastructure, bandwidth, what's the infrastructure? What are the network industries like? Because that's why there's no manufacturing. And what are the institutions? And are they domestic or are they multinational? And in the rest of the continent, most of the manufacturing is done by multinationals. So a long-winded answer to your point. The contradiction is the breakfast. So we needed Black economic empowerment, absolutely, because although white leaders were prepared to make these concessions, the white public, of course, were very reluctant to give up their privilege, and their status and their assets and their salaries were all dependent on it. It was an extractive oppression. So we needed structural programs and legislation, and those things came along. There is a big Black middle class now, which is the product of that. And most importantly, and what I want to say to you, the consequence of access to education. And so our universities opened, and now we're sitting with a fantastic asset of a new generation of engineers, doctors, accountants, and lawyers who are fully trained at our best universities. And our universities, some of them, not all of them, are really good. So the education system is the key about the way forward. How do we continue this transformation? The answer is the education system. Sadly, the public education system is very weak and has got worse, not better. So we have this tremendous drag effect where on the one hand, you have elite schools, good government and private schools at the one end, and very, very poor education at the other. And this is the silent killer of South Africa's prospects, because we're in the digital age, so kids are graduating with no internet access. 70% of our schools have no internet access at the school. So think about that for a minute. This is where the inequality gets embedded and gets made worse, actually, because elites and upper middle class and middle class people have access, so they can go up the chain of development, and the mass of the population don't. So that's a very, very big silent problem here, and has to be overcome. And tragically, this is all in the government's hands. There's a quote from Abraham Lincoln I found the other day. It says, if we face destruction, we are its authors. And we've had 27 years of freedom and we've done amazing things with it. But there's much, much more to do, and we've become corrupt. The ANC is very, very corrupt. And town officials are very corrupt. Our small towns are collapsing because of corruption and what we call deployment. So in government, the party places people into senior positions that are loyal to it. So what you have is very senior people being appointed without the knowledge or experience to run complex government departments, and they simply can't do it. And then they use these positions to access tenders and contracts, and that's a disaster.